This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 82 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. It's all about hobbies and travelling. Now, I've always thought that hobbies is kind of a silly word, but I just don't have a better word that describes it so aptly. Hobbies to me is always that word you learn when you're learning a new language and you learn to ask people, what's your name? How old are you? Where do you come from? What are your hobbies? But in everyday life, we never really talk about, we never say that. But anyway, you know what I mean when I talk about hobbies. And I think probably all of you who are listening today would claim that travelling is one of your hobbies. It's definitely one of mine too. But it's always interesting to think about and to hear about the other kinds of hobbies that people have and how they're connected to travelling. I'm going to talk to some guests who keep up their hobbies while they're travelling, and others we're going to talk about travelling for your hobbies. So the latter part is something that sprang to mind when I was planning this episode. When I was travelling abroad with my then boyfriend, who was another Australian guy, we were living and teaching in Japan and Slovakia and Germany. And when we moved to Japan, he developed a new hobby, or took up a new hobby, which was kendo. And it was a really cool idea. So kendo, as many of you may know, is a Japanese martial art, and he was inspired by the lightsaber fights and moves in the Star Wars movies, which were based on kendo. So that was kind of why he took up kendo. But it was a really interesting hobby to have as we travelled. Of course, in Japan, it was, a really easy hobby to pursue because kendo was everywhere. But then even when we were living in Europe, he could manage to find a kendo club nearby everywhere, which I was very surprised, but it was a really interesting way to get to know people. And occasionally we travel for kendo tournaments. I remember my first trip to the Czech Republic was to kind of suburban Prague, where there was a kendo tournament happening and stuff like that. So I have a lot of good experiences combining hobbies and travel in some way, and we'll talk about that in the episode today. But before we get to that, I just need to say a big thank you again to Glamping Hub. Glamping Hub is the sponsor for the Thoughtful Travel Podcast over this month. And Glamping Hub is a website full of unique accommodation in nature. So as I longingly browse through all of the different options on the website, I keep finding yurts, and that's what I wanted to highlight today. So yurts are those gorgeous big round tents. I have long wanted to stay in a yurt. I had planned a Trans-Mongolian train ride, which got rerouted to Trans-Siberian. It was many years ago during the SARS outbreak. It was like a terrible virus. And my flights to Hong Kong were cancelled. I just couldn't get into that region to take the train through Mongolia. So I ended up going from Vladivostok instead. It was amazing, except I've always felt I missed out on staying in a Mongolian yurt. So anyway, at Glamping Hub, you can actually just search for yurt and find hundreds of them all around the world, and I am lusting after all of them. So one day I will. But whatever unique accommodation you're after, head to glampinghub.com and have a good look around. Now, on to hobbies and travelling. And my first guest today is Kelly Dunning of Global Goose. And I actually came across a blog post Kelly wrote early last year about hobbies and long-term travel. And it was such an interesting blog post. I'll link to it in the show notes. And that led me to get in touch with her and invite her onto the podcast.
Lee and I have been traveling for the last 8 years or so, because we work online and digital nomads. So we've been moving our way around the world slowly. And what I was wanting to say in that post is that long-term travel is much different than going on holiday or going on a vacation for a week or two. Mm-hmm. It's like travel becomes your life. So it's really important to have like the balance of things in your life. Because when you go on vacation for a week or so, you can just kind of forget all your routines, leave everything at home, and just enjoy the place that you're going to 100% of the time. And then when you get back home, you get back into your normal routine. Mm. And it's like when you're traveling for several months or several years at a time, you can't really live like that. You can't live like just 100% like going out and eating everything and doing everything and seeing everything every single day, because you'll just drop dead of exhaustion.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you have to have like a balance of the healthy routines, like the exercise and eating well, and then things that I think are really important to health and balance as well is your hobby, because I think your hobby is something you're interested in is really important, like for your mental health. I think it keeps you like intelligent and engaged and learn, like you're always learning. I think it keeps you from getting stressed out. I think it's very grounding to have something that you do that you love, that's like not related to traveling, that you can just carry with you, that's the same everywhere you go. If that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. That's right. It's like a common passion that that follows you around. So when you're in a brand new crazy place, you've got something that you can do that makes you feel, I don't know, at home, sort of, you know.
Absolutely, because the nomadic life is like full of change, and every day or every week you might wake up in a completely different place, and you might have a different environment around you, but you can have that thread of continuity throughout your life, where you have something that connects you. And it's very grounding.
Yeah, I think it's super important. So what kind of hobbies have you found to be fairly portable hobbies during your, long-term travels?
Well, okay, so I really like to read, and I've always read ever since I was a kid. But then when I started traveling, I noticed I was reading less, maybe because I was more distracted by life on the road, and I didn't bring books with me. And then a few years ago, my boyfriend Lee gave me a Kindle as a present. And I was like, this is brilliant, because I can keep, hundreds of books in this thing, but it doesn't, it's about the size of a small notebook, and I can carry it everywhere I go. And I just started reading more. And over the last couple of years, I've started, just reading like on buses, trains, planes, like throughout the day, little bits in the day. And I think it wasn't until I started doing it that I realized how much I missed it. And it was like, oh, okay, this is so important to who I am, is to be reading. And it was something that I kind of left behind. And now it's really great, because I read both nonfiction and fiction. From the nonfiction books, I learn new things. From the fiction books, I kind of, have emotional catharsis, or like inspiration, or like, and I think it's improved my life in a lot of ways. I think it's improved my writing, because I'm a freelance writer. I think, it's improved like my kind of health and happiness. And it's just like, I was like, when that peace came back into my life, I realized, it's so important to be a whole person. Your hobbies and your interests are part of who you are. So when you're traveling, you're not just interested in travel, you're like a multifaceted human being, and you're interested in more than one thing.
That's true. Actually, that's so important, isn't it? Yeah, I never thought of it quite like that.
And it's like travel doesn't define who you are. It's like you're defined by like a whole range of things. And for my boyfriend Lee, one of his most important like hobbies is football to him, or soccer if you're from North America. But like
we say
he's
soccer
English
too, actually. So yes.
Yeah, soccer in the US, and but maybe your listeners know.
Yes, it depends where they are.
Soccer or football.
Yes.
But like he's from the north of England. He's been following his football club, Accrington Stanley, since he was a kid, and he's worked for the football club. He's gone to probably like hundreds of matches. He could talk about football for hours. Like that is part of who he is. I couldn't imagine Lee without an interest in football.
Right.
It's him.
Yep.
But when we go traveling, like that part of him doesn't disappear. It's still really important to who he is. So he's still taking that hobby with him, in the sense that he's like commenting on forums, he's reading the football news, and he gets up to watch football games. When we were in Australia, he'll get up at 5 a.m. to watch football.
I've never understood that kind of dedication to a sport, I have to admit.
It's really impressive. But I think the cool thing about that is like he's that hobby is always given him joy throughout his life, and he's taking it with him. And also the neat thing about that is like he has that automatic connection with anybody who's already interested in football. So like sometimes we'll go and we'll meet new people, and he'll find out that they also like football, and then it's an immediate conversation starter, because then they go, oh, what team do you support? And oh, I don't know, your manager is really great this season, blah blah blah. Like, I don't understand what they're talking about.
No, I wouldn't either, but I can see how, it's like an instant connection, and it's like a really easy in to connect with people and have a great chat, and before you move on to other things. Yeah, that's really cool.
It's really, really cool. And it's like any hobby you could do that for. Anything that you're interested in, if you take it with you when you're on the road, then you can connect with people who share that hobby with you.
Yeah, that's so true. I hadn't really thought that through, but when I lived in Europe, I was still really keen to learn. So I'd lived in Japan before then, and I'd learnt lots of Japanese while I lived there, and I'm a bit of a language geek, so I loved that, and I didn't want to forget all my Japanese. So that was kind of one of the hobbies I had when I lived in Slovakia and Germany. I found a way to learn Japanese there. Like in Slovakia, I had a language exchange partner. And then in Germany, I went to like the local, adult education classes in the evening to learn Japanese. And so I was learning Japanese, but in German, and that did twist my brain a bit. But it was so much fun, and I, got to meet people who had a similar interest to me, and it was like another whole dimension to traveling.
That's really cool.
It was heaps of fun. Yeah. Weird at times, but great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, we use we often, like, one of our other favorite hobbies that Lee and I share is going to pub quizzes and trivia nights.
Oh, cool.
We love that. And we've done that in different countries around the world. And when we do that, it's like really fun, because we meet other like trivia geeks who like to go do stuff like that. And then
I love to do that too. We have to do it in the same place sometime.
That would be great.
Yes, one day.
Like when we were in Melbourne, when we arrived in Melbourne, one of the first things we did was find the pub quiz near our house, at the nearest pub. And when we got there, we started going to this quiz, and I think it was like the second week that we went, we met the people at the next table over and started chatting to them, and then they became like our best friends in Australia. And they introduced us to all these other people. We became part of this friends group. We ended up doing like all these awesome things with them, like parties and barbecues and wine tasting, and we did a road trip together, and we went to Tasmania together. Like, it was just meeting them through that connection of that shared interest made our trip so much better.
It sounds to me like Kelly and her boyfriend have developed lots of great ways to still pursue hobbies while they're travelling. And I must make note that when I chatted with Kelly, they were stationed in Tbilisi in Georgia, and that's definitely the first person I've spoken to while they were in Georgia, so I kind of got a thrill out of that. But they have taken digital nomad life to heart, and it's really interesting to follow their journey. All right, my next guest is the lovely Anna Kwiecinska, and she has a lot of experience with people travelling to pursue a hobby because she helps people to do that. It's becoming more common for people to travel with a kind of an additional purpose.
Yes, so more than taking a cooking lesson on a Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly, something a bit more in depth. So have you seen that develop over the years?
I have, and I've certainly been a very active creator, I suppose, of that type of experience. I suppose it started for me years ago. I was living on an island in Greece, the island of Hydra. I lived there for 2 years, and there was a Dutch fellow who had, like me, washed up on the shores and was figuring a way to make his life there. And he would create small classes for people to come from Europe and have a holiday on an island. And for him, it was mainly painting. That seemed like the obvious thing. Right. In fact, I found myself roped into teaching watercolours, and I felt like such a fake. And I feel now I can finally tell the world that I really didn't know what I was doing.
Confession.
It was a confession. However, 3 decades later, I feel much, much more in control. And now, for the last 7 years, creative living retreats have been happening by the beach in Bali. So away from the traditional and historical creative and artistic centre of Bali, Ubud, up in the mountains, down by the sea, I bring an artist who has been someone that I've known through the gallery, my gallery life there, and who I know not only creates beautiful art, but has a real knack for teaching and a real gift for communication. Because without that, it just doesn't work. And I have indeed experienced that. I've been seduced by the work of an artist whom I really was hugely impressed by, and it turned into a big sort of individual ego masterclass, really, and it was very far away from what I'd wanted. But it was an interesting experience, and maybe I was the only one who was super aware of it. But I realised that the reason our retreats do work so well is because the teachers are natural teachers.
Right.
And they love it. They love it. So their job is to get you past that white page, that scary bit, whether as a writer or an artist, whether it's a paper or a piece of canvas, get over that almost without even thinking about it. Sort of tricky ways to
maneuver people past those fears and blocks.
And my job is to support that whole process, and then at the end of the week I become a gallery curator again, and I take those paintings and I hang them onto the walls of the pristine white gallery walls of Villa Nalaya. And we have an exhibition opening, we invite people from the village, and then we go out for a really big boozy dinner.
Oh, that sounds fabulous.
Which is also part of the gallery life.
Yes, so it's important. You have to celebrate.
But I think that week happens, not only is it a sort of a hothouse week, and it's not about shopping, we don't go shopping, we don't do anything else except wake up, come to the villa, have yoga with our yoga teacher, get into a space where you don't have to think about anything else except, your piece of art during the day. And the teachers are there for 6 hours for 5 days. It's 30 hours of tuition.
That's a lot. It's intense.
You couldn't make that happen in the city. It's just...
No.
It doesn't happen. And so in this 1 week, people go from not having held a coloured pencil since, kindy, sometimes, to having their art on the wall and surprising themselves, best of all, with what they've been able to do.
I think there's really a lot of value in pursuing a hobby on a trip, taking yourself out of your normal distracting environment of home and really immersing yourself in it. I think that sounds like a whole lot of fun. I'm not sure my artistic talents or lack of artistic talents would shift in any way by being that intense, because I just think I have other skills, but who knows, maybe one day I'll try it. What I am going to try is I'm running a blogging retreat with Anna through her creative living retreats later in the year, and I'll leave a link in the show notes in case there's some bloggers out there who want to come and join me in Bali for a few days of intense blogging fun. I can't wait. It's going to be so cool. I'm lucky, aren't I? Anyway, my final guest today is Colin Clapp, and I asked Colin about the kind of hobbies that he has in his current lifestyle. So he and his partner and their 3-year-old daughter are digital nomads as well, just like Kelly in the beginning of the episode. But they've just embarked on this, and they don't really have a lot of time or spare cash for hobbies at the moment. At the time I spoke to Colin, they were living in Malaysia, although I think by the time this airs, they will be living in Bali in Indonesia.
Hobbies per se are not our main priority. We feel like they will come when the time is right. But what travelling and our choice of lifestyle means is, and it's an intentional decision, is we're looking for hobbies that all three of us can grow into together.
Oh, nice.
So I'm not, as much as the thought of, if you got fit and healthy enough, maybe you could join a Masters football team, or maybe you could go and play golf or whatever. I look at that, and whilst the little boy in me would like to go and do that, it's a big call. My body's not up for it, but it's a big chunk of time out that is not with the girls. And even if I was to take up a musical instrument like the guitar, it's still very individualistic because of how much intensity it would take. And I've tried a few times, and I must admit it's not coming to me naturally.
I have the same problem with the guitar. I'd love to be able to play it well. I just can't seem to get through the middle part.
I can't even get through the beginning part. And I look at that and I go, well, that's a huge time investment for me to master that. If I'm going to master that, or even not even master it, even get to a point where you crank out a tune, that's a big time investment. So the desire's not really there to overcome that hurdle. So I thought, well, if I was going to have a musical hobby, what might it be? So we haven't gone down this route yet, but I look at just, maybe the African drums, because they're probably lightweight enough you could tie them to backpacks and find a way to transfer them, whereas a guitar or two is probably not going to work. But I probably could do it if they were small little African drums. And you could just sit one random evening and just, jam. And the sound wouldn't matter, the music wouldn't matter. You'd just be creating a sound together. And who knows what might come out of that.
What a cool idea.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you wouldn't probably have had an opportunity, but something that really was exciting for us a wee while ago, I'm talking about a month ago, is we discovered an outdoor climbing wall in Penang. I don't know if you've come across it or whatever. So there's a climbing club here.
Aha, perfect.
And they created this outdoor climbing wall, and it's huge. It's like 3-4 stories high.
Wow.
And, with a little bouldering thing. And so what the deal is, it's cheap as chips, and you come along and you pay virtually nothing to just be put into a harness, and they support you climbing up. And you can join the club and come and use it even more regularly for virtually nothing. But we just wanted to try it out, and little one's only 3, but she's climbing over everything. She's got a lot of confidence on climbing frames and climbing trees. And so we were like, let's go down there as a family. Ellie and I both like the idea of climbing. And so we just all put the harness on. Ellie and I just said, look, we'll go first. Little miss, calm down, wait. It's locked. Mummy and Daddy are going to show you what it's like. We're going to try and climb up this wall. And you just watch and just see if it's something you still want to do. And she was so excited. And she got the harness on. And she climbed onto the wall and she held the little grips and everything. And there was 3 routes she could have took up. And I mean, there's obviously no way she was going to get to the top.
No, I hope not. I'd be terrified to watch her up there.
And it was just encouraging her to participate as an equal. That was the thing. And she put her hands on the grips, and she was supporting herself, and the rope was obviously holding her. And unfortunately, I think the route we chose, she couldn't quite get her leg onto the first. So
needs to grow a bit.
Yeah, and I regret that we didn't get her on one of the others, because she might have just been able to make that first step and whatever. But her mum let go of her, and I was videoing it, and she went to go for it, and she fell off, and so obviously the rope just picked her up. And for a minute, I'm standing back, and she's literally sort of swinging in front. And I'm sorry, for listeners, I appreciate, I'm trying to paint a picture here. Amanda and I are talking, and I'm using visual.
That's true.
But yeah, she's for listeners, she's on the rope. She's swinging between the wall and me and her mum, and I can't quite see her face as she's swinging. And this probably only unfolded over a few seconds, but it seemed like eternity waiting for her to turn and face the camera, so that I could see whether she was okay.
Happy or terrified.
And she was beaming.
Oh, good.
Beaming. And she was slowly lowered to the ground. And you could just tell she'd enjoyed it. And the reason I'm sharing this story is just because all we wanted was a positive experience. All we wanted was a positive experience. And we haven't been back, only just because we just haven't had time, and the timing's not right. But all 3 of us really enjoyed that. And could that be a family hobby? Yes, it could.
I love Colin's idea of developing a family hobby. So will it be climbing? Will it be drumming? We'll have to stay tuned and see. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to episode 82 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I hope it prompts you to think about how you can either still take part in hobbies when you're traveling or pursue your hobbies further by booking a trip related to it. I think both possibilities are great. So a big thank you to the sponsor today, which was Glamping Hub. You can find their unique accommodation in nature at glampinghub.com. I also chatted with Kelly Dunning from the Global Goose, and she's at global-goose.com, and I will definitely leave a link in the show notes to her post about keeping up hobbies when you're traveling. So for any long-term travelers, it's I think a really must-read post. It's something that not many people talk about, and I think it's really important, and it was a really interesting post. After Kelly, I chatted with Anna Kwiecinska, and you can find her at annakwiecinska.com, and I'll also leave a link to the brilliant blogging retreat in Bali that I'm running with her in June. And last but definitely not least, I chatted with Colin from Parenting, Passports and Profits, and very logically you will find him at parentingpassportsandprofits.com. So come along and chat with all of us in the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group. There's a link in the show notes, or just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook. The show notes for this episode with all of these links and more, you can find them at notaballerina.com/82. Thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.